historic buildings on Treasure Island, the most spectacular is the Art Moderne Administration Building from the Golden Gate International Exposition, which we refer to by its romantic Navy designation, Building 1. And Building 1 is the home of the Treasure Island Museum. It was a U.S. Navy museum for 22 years until it was closed in 1997 along with the Naval Station. Our nonprofit started in 1976 as a civilian Friends of the Museum organization. We are now the Treasure Island Museum, and we reopened the museum 10 years ago. Since then, we've been carrying on a variety of museum activities, including a small exhibition gallery, a monthly lecture series. We're building our collection. Keep an eye on that dragon in the upper right-hand corner because I'll mention it later. 6 of the statues from the fair, from the Court of the Pacifica, are in front of the museum, and there's material on our website that you can link to by the codes on the labels. It'll tell you all about the statues. There's also an exhibit on our website. It used to be in the building behind ours of picture postcards, visiting the fair through picture postcards. The exhibit's not there anymore, the building's not there anymore, but the exhibit is on our website. But our main focus now is to bring back the full museum as part of the redevelopment. So in a few years, Treasure Island will be a major destination for visitors from around the Bay Area and tourists from around the world. They will enjoy those fabulous views of the city that Ron talked about, waterfront promenades, parks, an incredible collection of public art, and some of them may leave with a shopping bag or two. But will they leave more informed and engaged with the history of the island and the meanings behind that? That depends on whether there is a Treasure Island Museum, and that's what we're trying to preserve. There are a number of things about the island that make this an opportunity to create a museum. The stream of visitors, of course, the history and telling it in the place where it happened. And we have a concept for the new museum. We have small theaters, a couple of immersive experiences. Not enough time to go into the details, but talk to me later if you want the details. The Treasure Island Development Authority, the city agency in charge of the island, has given us up to 4,000 square feet for the museum, rent-free, in Building 1, and our capital campaign is getting underway. So what's so important about this history? On Treasure Island, what we found in 7 years of our lecture series and in planning the new museum is that the history doesn't stay in the past. There are these threads of history that continue into the present and into the future. Stuff that happened way back when has meaning for what we're worrying about, what we're concerned with now, and what we're planning for the future. So, people and institutions coming together to do great things. Not just the building the great bridges in the 1930s, but in the last decade, the longest self-anchored suspension span in the world, and soon a sustainable new neighborhood. So great civic undertakings. Military history, not just Naval Station Treasure Island, but an Army post on what was then called Goat Island in 1868, that beautiful 1873 lighthouse that became part of the Lighthouse Service, one of the predecessors of the Coast Guard. And Coast Guard Station San Francisco, as I'm sure all the yachtsmen know, is on Yerba Buena Island and will remain there into the future. So that thread of military history continues. Art. At the Art in Action exhibition at the fair, visitors could see artists like Diego Rivera at work right in front of them. Marco Cochran had a studio right behind Building 1 in the last decade, created these great sculptures, and his door was always open to the public. Now there's a $30 million Treasure Island Arts Master Plan, which will create the largest collection of outdoor public art in the Bay Area on the redeveloped island. It's received submission from world-class artists like Andy Goldsworthy and Ai Weiwei. So on Treasure Island, the history of art continues. Diversity. This is a big San Francisco value. The fair celebrated diverse ethnic and national heritages within San Francisco, around the U.S., and abroad. We had a Chinese village. Remember that dragon? That was a pair of dragons we got a couple of years ago that was on the entrance gate to the Chinese village at the fair. How cool was that? The Chinese village was not a national pavilion. We had a lot of national pavilions, Japanese pavilions, some incredible art from Europe, but the Chinese were fighting the Japanese. They didn't have the money or the attention to create a pavilion. So the Chinatown business community got together and created the Chinese village. Not a Disney village, but an authentic depiction of Chinese life and culture. Two of the most prominent women at the fair, Sally Rand on the left there, who ran the Nude Ranch, and Zoe Dellantis, the pirate theme girl of the fair. She's 104 years old, living in Ohio, and member of our honorary board of directors. And these two were pioneering women pilots. During World War II, the Port Chicago trial, how many of you know about Port Chicago? How many, you can guess, but how many of you knew when you came in here where the trial was held? Was held on Yerba Buena Island, which was part of Naval Station Treasure Island. So a crucial turning point in the very dawn of the 20th century civil rights movement that led to the desegregation of the Navy, the first major American institution to desegregate. That is part of San Francisco's heritage from Naval Station Treasure Island. Today, if you Google most diverse zip codes, you'll find 94130 coming up on all the lists. And over a quarter of the housing on the redeveloped island will be below market. So that thread of diversity continues through history to the present and into the future. So we have all of these historic themes, and I could go on. There are a lot more that continue to make the history relevant to us today. We can show people visiting the island how its history is relevant to them. Our lecture series is now in its 7th year, and as we get speakers for the lecture series, it's incredible the number of topics that we find that relate to Treasure Island. We had a lecture on days in the military during World War II at personnel centers like Treasure Island, which is very relevant when the lecture was being given and now today with transgender issues. Sea level rise. An anthropologist came and talked about native peoples coping with sea level rise through research on Yerba Buena and around the Bay Area. They've been dealing with it for 12,000 years. Walt Disney was at the fair at the beginning, and there are ideas he got at the fair that you could see in Disneyland. That was one of our lectures. The 49-mile scenic drive started at the fair so that people were incentivized to drive over the bridge and come spend money in San Francisco, and on and on. So the island's history is relevant to today and tomorrow, and it presents some of the best things about San Francisco and the Bay Area. All these themes are rooted and reflected in Treasure Island throughout its history and into the future. And our new museum will preserve that history and its meanings, communicate it to visitors from all over, and inspire people with the island where people continue to come together to do great things. Thank you.
Come on up top. Right behind you here.
So I told you we're going to have 3 speakers today. It's a big story this little island has its own. Come on up, Tom. Tom Andrews. You tell us your part of the whole story.
Okay, thanks. Well, Walt teased you, I noticed, about the military on board Treasure Island. I'm sure that the first thought in your mind at that point in time was, man, would I like to learn a little bit more about that. So I'm up here today to try and share a little bit of the Navy history with you. There's Professor Jim Sullivan who comes to the island routinely and gives an hour-long lecture on that. So what I'm going to try and do is synopsize this into about 15 minutes. So Walt, you can give me instructions on the computer.
Down arrow.
Down arrow.
But they have
Okay. All right. Let's see. That's the second slide.
up arrow.
Okay. There you go. The Navy story begins on Yerba Buena Island, long before Treasure Island was ever even conceived. In 1898, the Navy decided it needed a West Coast training facility, and President McKinley signed an executive order setting aside a portion of the island for a new station. Now, construction of the training station began in earnest in 1899, and the Commandant's quarters, now known as the Nimitz House or Building 1, was completed in January of 1900. Now, this is a close-up photo of, I gotta make sure the same thing's up there that I'm looking at. Photo of Yerba Buena Island shows the cove, which is still used by the U.S. Coast Guard today. The large building in the background, which doesn't look very large on that screen, but that was the Naval Training Station barracks, and the senior officer quarters are on the left up there, including quarters 1. Now here's a closer view of it, quarters 1 and the other officers' quarters on the left, and the main barracks below on the right, with sailors standing on the parade ground. Now, here we have 2 views of the training station parade ground, and you can see that these are not insubstantial facilities. These are big buildings. This is a big complex they had going on. And here we get a glimpse of life on the island in the early 1900s. All things considered, I would say life wasn't that bad, given the newness of the facility. Here we see the sailors using the communal wash house. The training station was a fully contained island community. Depicted here in the 1917 photo is the carpenter shop, the blacksmith shop, and the print shop. I want to draw your attention to those waste paper bins over there on the far right. Early recycling efforts, laying the groundwork for the future of San Francisco here. This is sick call. Okay, here the sailors are waiting outside the dispensary, which was a medical clinic on the island. I laughed when I first saw this picture. Look at all the people there, huh? Because it reminded me of my shipboard days, when sick call would be announced over the 1MC and a bunch of healthy teenage and 20-year-old sailors would run down the sick bay, and Doc used to call it well call. Now, fitness has always been a priority in the Navy, and here we have the station gymnasium, pretty healthy facility there, shown with its date of construction in 1907. In this picture, the building's 10 years old and still looking pretty sharp. And at the very top of Yerba Buena Island, they built a signal tower and radio mast with adjacent operations building there. This captures the facility during its construction phase. And here we have it completed. The Naval Training Station operated on Yerba Buena Island until 1923. From 23 onward, Yerba Buena Island continued to operate as a receiving station because they moved the training facility down to San Diego. And so the period from 1923 until the outset of World War II was really the quietest time out there on Yerba Buena Island, well, at least until it closed. Well, let's see, I need to get the graphic back there. There we go. Now I'm thinking this signal tower was the predecessor to the Tower Club. Now, has anybody ever been on the Yerba Buena Tower Club back when it was open a long time ago? Yeah, Mark has. Okay. Well, when I came out to my ship in Alameda in 1977, the building was an extension of the Officers Club, and it could hold up to 40 folks. Well, I had my Lieutenant J.G. wedding down party there. Now, anybody know what a wedding down party is? Okay, good. Okay, now wedding down party is a party you're supposed to throw for your fellow officers when you get promoted to the next rank. And the tradition is that you pay your incremental first month's pay to fund the party. Now, when you're going from ensign to Lieutenant JG, it's not a lot of money. Okay, but we had 5 of us that got promoted at the same time, so we had a pretty good time overall. Okay, now as you already know, Treasure Island was developed for the Golden Gate International Exposition. A new chapter for Treasure Island began at the end of the fair in late 1940. With war clouds looming, the Navy knew it would need a facility in the San Francisco Bay, and Treasure Island was it. Now notice the tall tower there kind of in the center of the picture. That's the Tower of the Sun, and we'll note it again in just a minute. Okay, when it was determined that Treasure Island would not work as an airport, for reasons you probably know, being sailors out of the bay and knowing the winds, the Navy took over the island and started to develop its facility there. As the Navy moved in, some of the fair buildings were reutilized, such as the exhibition buildings shown here. Now you can see that little pavilion down there. That used to be the foundation of the Tower of the Sun. I don't know why they took the tower down, but obviously they didn't need it. Now, the Navy had the island under construction throughout the war. Here we see housing units under construction at the far northern end of the island. And here you can see some more construction with Yerba Buena and the Bay Bridge in the background. Now notice the date on this. It's March 20, 1944. This is, for those of you familiar with World War II, the island hopping campaign had just started about 4 months earlier at Taro. Both former fair buildings and new facilities were incorporated into the master plan and stood side by side for the Navy on the island. I got to tell you, there was no lack of luxury accommodation there. So I know you can't see from the back of the room. That's like 1,000 bunk beds there in one of the hangars. So yeah, a lot of people going through. I think Walt said 4 million earlier. So, and they had big name entertainment too. Here's Bob Hope entertaining sailors and Marines on the island. But seriously, Treasure Island was a major point of embarkation and debarkation for sailors going to and from the Pacific Theater of Operations. And Marines too. Here we see some Marines waiting to board ships to take them to points west. But Treasure Island was more than just a transit facility. It served many functions during World War II. One was as the training and assignment center for the Maritime Armed Guard. And what those people did is these crews would be trained to serve on board merchant ships as the military protection element. And the program included training on the deck guns that were used as protection on most of the cargo ships. Here we see training being held on the 3-inch 50 caliber. This one, the top one, is one that was on Treasure Island itself, and this is one that's on a ship that's anchored out in the bay. Treasure Island was also a major training center for sailors going to sea on Navy ships. Here sailors are learning how to operate equipment that they're going to be encountering on board their ships. And they are taught cargo handling procedures too. Now, I'm a supply corps officer, so this is the kind of stuff that excites me. So if you don't mind, we'll just dwell on this slide. They're also taught the basics of shipboard guns. Now, they had these 5-inch 38s on some of the cargo ships. Jeremiah O'Brien has one. But this trainer actually was still located on the island next to Building 2 when they closed the facility in 1997. And of course, the most basic training of all, and you guys are all familiar with this, teaching people how to do knots. So it's kind of funny to see all these knots spread out all over the table and 2 people back there doing the instruction. A lot of fun. The Treasure Island wasn't just about ships. As Walt mentioned a minute ago, they had Navy seaplanes. Pan American Airlines was operating there too, but Navy seaplanes operated out of Clifford Cove. Treasure Island was also a place of worship. This is the Treasure Island Chapel, which I understand is still there and is going to be preserved on the island, which I was real happy to hear. Now here's an interior view of the chapel. Walt, I'm not sure about this. Okay, I'm not sure about this, but I think the organ that the sailor is playing up here is the Hammond organ that was just donated to the museum by the family of Kay Rooney, who played the organ at the chapel and other Treasure Island venues for decades. I just found this yesterday. Early in the war, the Navy developed a hospital on the island. The facility was commissioned in April of 1942 and grew to an official bed capacity of 500 beds. Within a year, though, it was caring for 700 patients. And by 1944, that was up to 1,326 patients. A lot of patients for a 500-bed facility. Because it was readily accessible both by water and by road, it functioned as an acute care facility, receiving most ill, and most seriously injured both overseas and from the Bay Area. It was decommissioned in 1947. And Treasure Island was a place where the weary sailors came home and passed their way through TI on their way to the final destinations. This photo shows a sailor getting his first stateside chow. Big smile on his face. Importantly, the Treasure Island was also home for the women accepted it for volunteer emergency services. Otherwise, we probably know them as the Waves. And here we see some wave training. Okay, now I'm not quite sure why the lady on the right is pointing her gun at the photographer, but I'm hoping that she didn't have a grudge. And the Marines were also an integral part of Treasure Island. Here, Marines are raising the colors in front of Building 1. Now, the base of that flagpole, I'm not quite sure about the flagpole, but the base is there today. But the palm trees that you see there are a little bit taller now. The Marines were primarily responsible for the security of the facility. After World War II, Treasure Island slowly transitioned to peacetime support, but maintained its profile as an administrative hub and training center. You can see from this 1946 picture, well, you might be able to see, that they're still supporting a lot of ships there. There's destroyer escorts and destroyers down there in the southeast corner. And as we moved into the nuclear age, it became home, Treasure Island became home to one of the first ship mock-ups that was used to teach sailors how to decontaminate ships that were exposed to radiation and nuclear fallout. If you look at that picture, you can see that wasn't a pretty task. And you can see how the safety concerns that were back then were treated a little differently than they would be now. And the island became home to multiple Navy technical schools, such as the A schools, which are the initial level of school, for the electronics, hull maintenance, radar, and NBRC, which is nuclear, biological, radiological, and chemical warfare. And the B and C schools, which are the graduate level schools for electronics, warfare, and NBRC. Now, this is personal to me because I did this training here. Whoops, there we go. Did this training here. The island also hosted these impressive facilities to train sailors on damage control and firefighting. Here you see the famous, well, the infamous Buttercup, where sailors were placed in a compartment. They flooded the compartment, and their goal was to stop the flooding. So that's what they're trying to do right now, is stop the flooding, as you would find on a ship that was damaged. Both the Buttercup and the firefighting facility were very realistic and very challenging, certainly living up to the credo of train as you fight. And this training function was near and dear to my heart. The Navy stationed two fast frigates at Treasure Island with crews that were a mixture of active component and reserve component officers and sailors. And for young supply corps officers, I was a little older at the time, but for young supply corps officers coming up, this was the place that you would go to earn your Officer of the Deck Underway qualifications, and they would do this for decades to come. And what you see here, that's the Lang and the Gray tied up at the pier. The island also became the heart of the administrative activity for a large swath of the West Coast, housing the Reserve Readiness Command, Region 20, and the Active Duty Regional Command. A number of the regional commanders, in fact, are retired here in the Bay Area, most notably Rear Admiral Bilofsky and Rear Admiral Tony. The island also housed the Regional Dental Clinic and Medical Center and a number of other support activities. Alas, all good things come to an end. And with the BRAC Committee deciding to close the Alameda Naval Air Station and Naval Station Treasure Island, the fate of the military in the Bay Area was basically sealed on September 30, 1997. Here you see Secretary of the Navy Ray Mabus presiding over a ceremony with Representative Pelosi and Mayor Gavin Newsom, wherein the Navy in San Francisco agreed to the terms of the transfer of the island from the Navy to San Francisco. This ceremony occurred on August 20, 2010. Excuse me. So why am I here? Okay, back in 1980, when I was Lieutenant JG aboard the USS Roanoke in Alameda, I stood the watch late at night. Now, obviously, that's not late at night, but it's the only pictures I could find. And I looked across the bay at the blinking lights of Diamond Heights, and I thought to myself, gosh, I could retire here. I could fly P-3s out of Moffett. I could fly C-9s out of Alameda. I had exchanges, hospitals, golf courses, all at my disposal, and certainly enough to support me in my retirement. So what happens? By the time I retired 29 years later, all 23 military installations in the Bay Area are closed. The only thing remaining were a few reserve centers and the admittedly substantial Coast Guard presence. Not much left of the U.S. military. At one of our Midway celebrations a few years back, I told Admiral Frank Keating, who was former PACOM and former PAC Fleet Commander, that as the junior flag officer present, that it may be me who turns out the light and closes the door on the Navy tradition in San Francisco, sad as that might be. That's why I signed on with the Treasure Island Museum, okay, because I see it as one of the vehicles to keep the tradition alive. I know Walt and Mirian feel the same way, and I hope you do too. So with that, thanks, and I'll turn this over to Mary.
All right, third speaker is Miriam Saez, as in Baez, the singer. Can you sing too, Miriam?
I
Of
can.
the Treasure Island Development Authority. Miriam.
Thank you. Thank you. Just 1 second while I get set up here. As Walt has instructed me, I've taken his lead many a time for these speaking engagements. I just want to say, first of all, thank you for having us out here today. Walt and Tom gave great history lessons, and there's hundreds of thousands of stories that could be told about Treasure Island. And over a glass of wine or beer, we all could, I'm sure you have some stories to share with us. And I hope that 100 years from now, there'll be somebody standing there talking about us and how we overlooked the bay and had this story presentation about Treasure Island's future. So today, this afternoon, I'd like to go over a couple things about the future. They did a great job about the past. I'm just going to talk briefly about lots of things that are going on the island. First of all, to start with what the community is today, what the Treasure Island Future Development Program is, which is the technical work that's going to get done, seismic improvement, what we're doing about sea level rise, and the infrastructure that needs to get done to support the island of the future. I want to talk about housing, the transportation, and give you some information about what it'll look like open space-wise and recreation parks. So I don't have to go through all of this, but this is what we look like today. Well, not quite today. Perhaps about 5 years ago, this is what we look like on the island, but it's transformed immensely. We do have about 2,200 people who live on the island right now, and Treasure Island operates the island and to provide for these households. We also have a very big commercial leasing program. Treasure Island does not get funded by the city, the state, or the feds. So everything we made, all the income that we gained from housing and from commercial rents is how we kept the island afloat, if you will. And of course, we're the recreation destination of the Bay Area. You might think it's the yacht club, but I always say it's Treasure Island, where we have a fantastic sailing center. We have our own yacht club there too. Little League come from all over the bay. Fantastic Gaelic football and rugby going on, and we have the YMCA that provides for our local community. Planning for the reuse. As Walt said, the Navy base closed in '97, but the plan began, and that's when Treasure Island, the entity, was developed by the state. We had a competitive process, and Treasure Island Development Authority, whose partners include Wilson Meany, are the ones that are putting in the capital for this very large endeavor, estimated now to be around $2.6 billion. And the city has already approved all the plans for the island. You might say, why did it take so long? Well, besides it being San Francisco. We have to have a land use plan and an infrastructure plan. And planning has to be involved, and community development has to be involved. We need an open space plan. So all these plans have to be in place and more before we can get started. And it took many years of getting those plans approved by all the special interest groups. We have a regulatory authority TITA does, to have standards and guidelines from which the island will get developed. And this is kind of a block image of who's in charge of what parts. In the green part, it's TITA that maintains the standards of development, and the vertical development is done by the developer. So the program overview is 8,000 homes coming to Treasure Island, both for rent and for sale, over 500 hotel rooms, 450,000 square feet of retail space and office space, but most importantly, I think, which lends itself to what Treasure Island is today, has been in the future, 8 300 acres of open space. Like I said, we'll have to have a whole new infrastructure, geotechnical improvements, and deal with sea level rise. These things are underway today. I don't know if you've visited the island lately, but it's a mess. And we move soil here, we move soil there. There's lots of big trucks up and down the island. It is a mess. But the mess is, it's a good thing because we were waiting for it for such a long time. So we made the Navy transferred the property to the city, Treasure Island. Treasure Island transfers the property to the developer, and then they began the work to complete, utilities, relocation. We do plan to start construction on new homes, and we hope to open some new homes by late 2022. And not to shock you, but this program is scheduled to be completed in 2035. This is a picture of the mobilization taking place along the front of the island and also along the shoreline. That's the Building 1, and it's standing there all by itself, lonesome right now. Geotechnical work, quickly. As described earlier, Treasure Island was built from the bay, and so we need to shore up that bay mud so that we can build on it. And that begins by, let me see, we'll be doing parameter work around the island. That doesn't show up there, does it, my little arrow? No. Okay, so the orange around will be shoring up the island. This green area here, we'll be doing some geotechnical improvements. The brown area is actually where the buildings will be built. And the concept behind this is that we're placing the weight of the soil in these brown areas that represent the weight of the future buildings. That's the easiest way to describe it. And some of those components are the soil cementing mixture along the around the perimeter, the shored up, a process called a surcharge load, which is what I described, the weight, and then the water wicks up and it helps the land to settle faster. Then this is going on right now. I feel like we're under earthquake every moment. We have these bores that go in and shake up the island, and it gets filled in and comes out. All this to improve the liquefaction on the island. New infrastructure. I was telling somebody at the table earlier, not one piece of plumbing or electrical from the past will be there. We have to replace all of it. It's going to be a brand new island with a new water treatment plant, new storage facilities, underground wastewater, stormwater, telecommunications, all brand new. And we're going to change. It's not going to be a 90-degree angles on the streets. We'll be doing it slanted so that we. This is to respond to microclimate change, but also, the wind tunnels that we have around the city. We're trying to avoid the wind tunnels by this kind of street grid. With regards to sea level rise, there's an adaptive nature to this, adaptive management strategies. I'm sorry that this pointer doesn't work, but along the areas in the white, where you see white, we'll have these areas will be these areas will be lifted up, and then to the north part where the stripe is. And along the east coast, those will be areas that will be environmentally friendly, that will take on any water that comes in. Let me move it here so it's a little clearer to you. So right now we have a base water level of 5.6 feet. That's like where the blue line is on the bottom there. You see that we actually can maintain a future level of 8.6 feet without doing anything, but we're going to improve our elevation by another 14 to 16 inches. So what will happen is that in the event that there is sea level rise, we have plenty of room for it, and that red diagram there shows that we could even build it up further if necessary, if the projections change. So we're pretty solidly convinced that we'll be able to handle the sea level rise as it happens. In this particular slide, you'll see that we have, in the event the water raises up, it'll go into the terrace, it'll go across the promenade, and then it'll go across a lawn way before it ever enters or sees its way to any building. And that's what's depicted in that corner shot. So the future development, we're taking advantage of the south side and the west side of the islands, of course, the views, and done in many phases. Count them up, I think it says about 8 phases there. But what we're getting started with right now is on Yerba Buena, and then along the southern and eastern shore. And what that would look like, again, is it's 6,000 units of market rate for sale housing, and about 2,000 units of what we call affordable housing or inclusionary housing. Beautiful shot at what Yerba Buena will look like from the east. Bird's eye shot from the top. This will include apartment building, one focused apartment building, many townhouses, and some single-family homes, all totaling about 262 units on Yerba Buena Island. Now coming down, well, actually this is a picture of what that mid-rise will look like. Fantastic architecture. This is the flats, what they're calling the flats. And then the townhomes will have that. We plan on looking like that in the future. So concentrating in that area coming down to Treasure Island, as I said, we do have an affordable housing program that includes Towards to Plowshare, the Veterans Affordable Housing Management Group. They're partnering with Chinatown Community Development, and the first affordable housing building will be for vets. The second affordable housing that will come online being built by Catholic Charities in partnership with Mercy Housing. And that's what the veterans housing will look like on the island, 104 units. And now, the island will be a mix of mid-rise and high-rises. And this is to represent that there will be how the configuration will be in the beginning of the development. So mixed high-rise, mixed towers for sale, and for rent. And I'm going to give you a sense of how that might be built out. That's what it might look like in the first phase, in the second phase, and in the third phase. Oh, and by the way, let me go back to that one. The return of the Tower of the Sun that Tom pointed out earlier is the epicenter there. I wanted to tell you about some of the architects that will be building these units, but just suffice to say that in the first lots of buildings that will be coming out there, these are renowned firms that will be developing. Handle Architects. This is what their building will look like and what it'll look like on the street level. Mark Cavagarnio Associates. Somebody knows them. That's what their building will look like and what it'll look like on the street level with PNW Architects. Again, just to give you a sense that it's not going to be a cookie cutter type of development. It's really going to be an outstanding architectural feat, as Treasure Island was in the beginning, right? An architectural feat. David Baker and his renderings here. And this is what it'll look like from a scale point of view. If we had time, the video can actually take you through the streets and show you how it winds around, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to go ahead and move this along. So we'll have 8,000 units, about 20,000 people, 2,000 right now. So how are people going to get around? There'll be a brand new ferry terminal from the ferry building here to Treasure Island. AC Transit will take care of folks coming from East Bay onto the island, and we'll have a new set of headwinds coming in with a Muni coming to the island. In addition to that, there'll be an inter-mode of transportation. When people get to Building 1, Then they can travel by way of shuttle to other parts of the island, and it's a very walkable island at that point. Of course, there'll be the bicycle network that'll be overlaid on top of that, and everything will be shared ways. Bicycles will be with bikes, bicycles will be with cars, and people. So it's all shared public ways in most of the island. The open space, as I said earlier, is 21 acres of flexible sports space. Most of the Gaelic fields and the soccer folks will probably be returning to the island, but in a way that is more multiple use rather than single use as it is today. There will be urban farms, there will be many trails, the sailing center will have a great presence, the marina will get redone, and it will again continue to be a recreational destination for the Bay Area. There'll be a series of parks all throughout the new grid, and parks, all along the grid. The waterfront park will be probably the most popular place because it'll face the city, and it'll be used for multiple things there, multiple use. The promenade will look like this, we hope, as we come around. The church, Tom, that talked about earlier, is in the red outlined area. It'll be preserved and become our cultural center. Behind it is the Tower of the Sun. And then when we come around the island, of course, beautiful Building 1 will have the ferry cut out right in front of it. On the south side, we'll have the promenade, the Clipper Cove Promenade, with the city view in the back. There it is, the marina, finally, a world-class marina coming to Treasure Island, and how it might look in the future with 220 slips. And parks on top of Yerba Buena too, which will also incorporate lots of the art that's coming to the island. So it's going to be a fantastic future. The beach will get redone, and again, a place for people in San Francisco and around the Bay Area can come recreate. And that's what she looks like at the end.
When will it be done? When will it be done?
2035, we hope.
Welcome again to our Wednesday yachting luncheon. Today the subject is Treasure Island. It's a treasure indeed, and we couldn't have a more informed group to talk all about it. Introducing from the far corner, Rear Admiral retired Tom Andrews. Thank you, Tom. And then closest to us, Walt Bilofsky, chairman of the new Treasure Island Museum. And closest to us, Mirian Saez, there we go, Miriam Saez of the Treasure Island Development Authority. So let me ask Walt first. Walt, when is the first time you ever came to Treasure Island? How did you get interested in these questions?
Good question. I'm a staff commodore at the Tiburon Yacht Club, and we used to cruise into the old Treasure Island Yacht Club. They have a new facility now. And one weekend our club cruised in, and I walked over to the Treasure Island Museum, the Naval Museum in the lobby, and I just got hooked. I've been to a lot of museums, and I have to say I trot through a museum pretty quickly, but there was love in that museum. I just have to say it was amazing. And the artifact that grabbed me was this chart on the wall from Honolulu to San Francisco, and a clipper pilot a navigator had drawn that chart doing the overnight flight, so you could see their route line taking off from Honolulu. You could see the star sites, the little triangles. There was a sunrise, little happy face, and the where they picked up the radio signal from the Farallones, and you could practically smell the oil in the cockpit. And that chart and the whole museum just grabbed me, and I've been stuck ever since.
So Tom Andrews, retired Admiral.
Yes.
You mentioned, but let me ask, what was the very first military purpose? What year was the first military installation on Yerba Buena Island those days?
Well, I think they opened in 1942. They started construction in 1940, I think.
Wasn't there something in 1917?
Well, okay, on Yerba Buena,
Yes.
yes, okay, that was 1899 to 1900 when the Coast Guard actually established their presence on the island. That's when they built the Nimitz House and the parade grounds and things like that. It's evolved quite a bit since then. So now you've got the Western Regional Commander in the Commandant's house there, the 3-star Vice Admiral who's there on Coast Guard Island, and it's a fairly significant Coast Guard presence.
So now we keep going back and forth calling it Yerba Buena. Who can tell us the history of the names for that island? Goat Island? When was it? Was Yerba Buena? Walt, are you the one who's going to tell us this?
Yes, well-
the first name and then give us the chronology.
The first name I know about was Goat Island.
What year we're talking about?
I don't know when it was first named, honestly. What I do know, and Admiral Tom wouldn't know anything about that, but there was an ARMY post there in the 1860s. ARMY.
Army. Oh, I didn't hear that. I didn't hear you say Army. Okay, I understand.
You're just trying to keep me from understanding.
Okay, so Miriam, whoa, the plans that you drew up. What's the overall budget for? Now I know it's got to be in phases, but you said through 1935. What's the overall total budget to develop the island?
Right now, it's estimated at $2.6 billion. And growing.
2.6 billion. Now, where is that money coming from?
That is totally developer money.
You weren't writing checks, is that your
No.
checkbook?
No, I collect checks.
Collect checks. So what is the source of
The
funding?
developer is responsible for all the capital improvements on the
Okay.
island.
The developer. Now, we all remember that the Presidio Trust was a very innovative public-private partnership. It's actually a model now. It's the only, as I understand it, national park in the entire system that is cash positive. There were big proposals. Shorenstein and many others made proposals to develop a smaller part of the island. I think it was 6%, and then that would fund the nonprofit portions of the island. Is that similar? Is there a similar model being contemplated? What's the model for the TI funding?
Well, there's again, the capital come from the developer, and there'll be, infrastructure improvements, monies, revenues that will be generated, and that will keep like the sports fields going and the transportation modes
Is the
going.
developer a private entity?
Yes,
So private capital.
private capital, yes.
I got you, okay.
And then there'll be infrastructure taxes that will be earned from those, right? The difference between what the tax base is today and the improvement, those monies will be used to maintain parks and services.
Okay. How many acres is Treasure Island and separately Yerba Buena Island?
Well, we always say 365 just to make it easy.
365
Yes,
acres.
and then 65, the south and the western parts are the parts that will be developed.
And you mentioned high-rise and mid-rise, I thought you said.
That's right.
How, mid-rise look like they're 6 stories or so? What do you
6 stories.
what do you define to be mid-rise?
About 6 stories, and then high rise will go up to, I believe, 8 stories. It might be even higher than that.
Okay, high.
It depends on where you're at on the island and how, what's going to be developed.
Seeing you with your hands like this
That's big.
reminded me of Millennium Tower.
Oh, no!
Because we have Phil in San Francisco. I know this comes as a surprise to everyone, but the Phil in San Francisco means that if you don't dig deep into bedrock with the foundations, so I know that you must be thinking a lot about this.
And that's exactly why the depiction of how we're pounding the soil and compacting it so that so it is stable in the future. And this is a model that has been bettered by everyone and thinks that this will stabilize Treasure Island. Treasure Island has gone through a couple earthquakes and she hasn't liquefied. So we're confident with the seismic upgrade improvements that are planned that indeed will prevent from any liquefaction in the future.
So now you mentioned a ferry, a TI ferry, back and forth. Vince, turn the sound down just a little bit, guys. So you mentioned that there's going to be a ferry, so ferry service back and forth.
Yes.
Okay.
Ferry service 10 minutes from the island to the ferry building in San Francisco. It'll be a great way to get people, again, the population could swell up to 20,000 people. So it's just not cars, and in fact, we're kind of trying to minimize the cars on the island so that people use transportation as its first means of transport. San Francisco is, in effect, a transit-first city. So we are building for that.
Well, that's wonderful. I was happy to hear that. Well,
Yeah, and they've already started to build the ferry pier. Construction is underway. And when it's built, this will be the shortest ferry ride for all those tourists that come to the Bay Area and want to take a ferry somewhere, and they're going to get off right in front of Building 1 in our museum.
So Tom, what are the current military purposes for the island? Are there any current military purposes, or are they mostly historic?
Yeah, only Yerba Buena.
Okay.
Yerba Buena maintains its Coast Guard presence, but at Treasure Island, there's currently no military purpose. Well, I take that back. The BRAC office is there in Building 1 too, and that's the residual U.S. military presence on the island.
And so,
There is another government presence, by the way, and that is the Job Corps Training Center. That is right in the middle of Treasure Island.
That's right. We have not only the Job Corps, a learning facility, we have also a Life Learning Academy is also a facility, a charter school on the island. And in the future, we will have a public school return to the island. When the island population decreased over the years, of course, this school had to close, but it will return as a full public school on the island.
you mentioned affordable rent, Mirian. Give us the rent of affordable rent. What does that mean? How much will people be able to rent? What kind of facilities on the island?
Well, it's best, market rent is market rate, and that whatever it
So
is,
two-bedroom
then.
will cost what?
But, I can't tell you what a two-bedroom costs today, what might be in the future, but I can tell you, this is a very important part of this, there's 2,200 families that live on the island today. We try to, our
Treasure Island Development Authority.
Treasure Island Development Authority are providing protections for those families that were with us when the development agreement was inked. So their future rents will be stabilized and will not, if you will, increase with the way that the increases have been most recently with rents on the city. In terms of affordable housing for sale, it will be participating in what's called the below market rate program, which is managed by the city. And the mortgages on those properties will be based on their income. It's kind of a reverse way of how you do a mortgage. You figure out what a family can afford, and then that you mark up to the what the purchase price will be.
So let me see if I got the underlying economics correct. You're saying that a private developer is developing the island, and he's agreed as part of the development, or they've agreed as part of the development process and project to abide by certain housing criteria, and there'll be X amount of low income and medium income housing guaranteed under such an agreement.
Yes, absolutely. 5% of all the units on the market rate that the market rate developer builds will be towards below market rate families. And again, the below market rate is folks that earn between 80,000 and around 120,000. That'll be the affordability. In addition to what the obligation is on the developer's side, the city too is by way of Catholic Charities and by way of Swords of Plowshare, they have their own affordable housing programs. And those families who will live there will pay approximately 30% of their income towards the rent. So the island today is very affordable. The market rents are minimal compared to the city. So we will maintain a range of offerings, both for sale and for rent on the island.
And so, Walt, the museum, how many square feet, how big a museum, what's the cost to build the museum?
It's going to be 3,500 to 4,000 square feet, and it will cost us somewhere around $8 million to build out and build the exhibits.
Source of funds?
Donations. Anybody bring their checkbook? Am I allowed to say that?
Yes. So private donations, and so you've got a development campaign, I'm imagining, underway?
Yeah, we have a capital campaign underway. So far, we're doing very well.
Uh-huh. And so give us some traffic metrics that you're anticipating when the museum is done, and what's your projected completion date?
Boy, I haven't looked at those in a while. I think now we're hoping to open first quarter of 2023. And honestly, we've asked the developer for what their visitor traffic is going to be, and we haven't gotten any answers yet. But like I said, with that ferry going from the waterfront, we think it's going to be very good.
I would agree, the ferry would be great. 10-minute ferry ride, you get a view, and you get to go to this newly developed island. So, Tom, you said there aren't any future that you know of military applications for the island, but you mentioned that there were X thousands of people stationed there as first a hospital. So, in the overall history of military presence on the island, is there a theme? Is it usually education and/or hospitals? I didn't hear of other needs.
Yeah, well, it evolved over the course of time. During the war, it was a training and transit facility where I think, Walt, you said that 4 million sailors and Marines actually went through Treasure Island on their way to the war. Huge number. The 500-bed hospital had up to 1,300 people in it at one point in time, and also serviced the Bay Area, not just the military community. After the war, it became a little quieter, but it was a training location, and it was also housing. A lot of Navy folk and Coast Guard folk were housed both at Treasure Island and Yerba Buena Island. But they had the A schools for 4 different ratings, and they had, like I said, they had the mock-up of that nuclear biological cleanup ship, the Pandemonium, which was, I think, almost a one-of-a-kind out there to teach people how to decontaminate ships. So it was primarily a training and administration hub for all the years after the war until 1997.
And so, Walt, back to you for a bit. So whose vision was it to have the museum? How did the idea of having a museum on this pretty gem in the middle of San Francisco Bay come up?
Well, the museum started in 1975 as a bicentennial project by the Navy. It was the Navy and Marines Museum, Marine Corps Museum, and then became the Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard Museum, and then as civilians kind of infiltrated it, and our organization got more involved and provided docents, got more interested in the Golden Gate International Exposition, the Pan Am Clippers. It eventually became the Treasure Island Museum. But it started as a bicentennial exhibit in 1975. And how many people have been out to Building 1? Yeah, if you go out there in that beautiful semicircular lobby, there's this huge mural, and the mural painted by Lowell Nesbitt for the museum and the bicentennial has the history of the Navy from the Great White in the Pacific, from the Great White Fleet going all the way across to this kind of science fiction-y underwater vision of what they thought in 1976 that the Navy of the future would be. They weren't exactly right, but an amazing mural.
So my son-in-law threw a birthday party for Twitter on Treasure Island as an event, a couple thousand people. And I want to tell you, it was the most stunning view to look from TI across at San Francisco and then the Golden Gate, etc. It was really, it is a scenic environment. And so we want to thank you, all of you who've been so important in the restoration and really the repurposing of Treasure Island. Thanks very much for being here, Mirian and Walt and Tom. Thank you so much for coming to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.
Thank you.
And with that, luncheon is adjourned.